swallowed by the moon shadow. The Shadow Child. In the year 2145, a strange astronomical event occurred that changed the course of human history forever. The moon's orbit unexpectedly shifted, causing a prolonged lunar eclipse that bathed the Earth in an eerie, extended shadow. The sky darkened and an unnatural chill descended upon the world, as if the very essence of warmth and light is being drained away. As the world watched in awe and terror, reports began to surface of people disappearing without a trace, swallowed by the shadows during the eclipse. At first, the disappearances were dismissed as isolated incidents, but as the numbers grew, panic spread like wildfire. Entire cities were plunged into chaos as the shadows seemed to come alive, reaching out with icy tendrils to claim their victims. Eyewitnesses spoke of seeing their loved ones vanish before their very eyes, their screams echoing in the darkness before being abruptly silenced. Some claim to have seen shadowy figures lurking in the corners of their vision, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly malevolence. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, broken only by the distant wails of those who had lost someone to the shadows. As the eclipse continued, the world held its breath, wondering if the sun would ever emerge from behind the moon again. The shadows grew longer and deeper, and the line between reality and nightmare blurred. Humanity was forced to confront the terrifying realization that they were not alone in the universe, and that the shadows might be hiding something far more sinister than they ever imagined. Dr. Ethan Blackwood, a renowned astrophysicist, stood on the rooftop of his state-of-the-art research facility. His eyes were fixed on the eclipsed moon, its eerie red glow casting an unsettling light across the city skyline. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, and the shadows seemed to dance with a sinister life of their own, as if they were sentient entities waiting to pounce. Ethan's colleague and close friend, Dr. Maya Russo, joined him on the rooftop, her face etched with concern and a hint of fear. She clutched a tablet in her hands, her knuckles white from the intensity of her grip.
Ethan, have you seen the reports?
Maya asked, her voice trembling slightly.
People are vanishing without a trace, and there's talk of strange creatures lurking in the shadows. Social media is flooded with videos and eyewitness accounts, and the authorities are struggling to keep up.
Ethan nodded grimly, his brow furrowed in deep thought.
I've been monitoring the anomalies, Maya. The readings are off the charts, unlike anything I've ever seen before. There's something deeply wrong with this eclipse. It's as if the moon's shadow is acting as a portal to another dimension, a realm beyond our understanding.
As they spoke, a figure emerged from the shadows behind them, moving with an otherworldly grace. It was a tall, imposing man, his face obscured by a hooded cloak that seemed to blend seamlessly with the darkness. He exuded an aura of ancient wisdom and power, and his presence sent a shiver down their spines.
Dr. Blackwood, Dr. Russo,
he said, his voice deep and commanding, yet tinged with a hint of urgency.
I am Azrael. I am a member of the Knights Templar. I have come to warn you. The prophecy is unfolding, and the Shadow Child will soon be born. The fate of our world hangs in the balance, and we must act quickly to protect the child and prevent the forces of darkness from claiming them.
Ethan and Maya exchanged a glance. They knew that their lives were about to change forever, and that they were being drawn into a world they never knew existed. Maya's eyes widened.
The Knights Templar, I thought they were a myth.
Azrael smiled enigmatically.
We have existed in the shadows for centuries, waiting for this moment. And now we need your help to find and protect the Shadow Child.
The rooftop suddenly felt like the epicenter of a cosmic battle, and they could feel the weight of destiny pressing down upon them. Ethan and Maya found themselves drawn into a world they never knew existed, a realm where the lines between reality and nightmare blurred. They learned that the prolonged lunar eclipse had weakened the barriers between dimensions, allowing dark entities to cross over into their world. These entities, known as the Shadow Wraiths, sought to claim the Shadow Child for their own nefarious purposes, and their presence brought with it a bone-chilling cold and an overwhelming sense of dread. As they delved deeper into the mystery, Ethan and Maya discovered that the disappearances were linked to the Shadow Wraiths. Those who spent too long in the shadows during the eclipse were being pulled into the parallel dimension, their souls consumed by the insatiable hunger of the Wraiths. Eyewitnesses spoke of hearing the agonized screams of the taken, their voices echoing in the darkness before being abruptly silenced. Azrael guided them through the shadows, his tattoos glowing with an otherworldly light that seemed to keep the Wraiths at bay.
We must find the Shadow Child before the next eclipse,
he urged, his voice laced with a sense of urgency.
If the Wraiths claim the child, our world will be lost, plunged into an eternal darkness from which there will be no escape.
As they navigated the eerie, shadow-drenched streets, Ethan and Maya could feel the presence of the Wraiths all around them. The air grew colder with each passing moment, and the shadows seemed to writhe and twist with malevolent intent. The occasional glimpse of glowing red eyes in the darkness sent shivers down their spines, and the whispers of the Wraiths filled their minds with a sense of impending doom. Time was running out, and the fate of the world rested on their shoulders. Ethan and Maya knew that they had to find the Shadow Child before the Wraiths did, or all would be lost. The eclipse had set in motion a chain of events that threatened to unravel the very fabric of reality, and only they stood between the world and the encroaching darkness. Their search led them to a woman named Raven, who possessed a mysterious and haunting past and an uncanny ability to communicate with the shadows. Raven had always felt a strange connection to the darkness, as if it were a part of her very being. But it wasn't until the eclipse that she realized the true extent of her powers and the terrible burden that came with them. In a chilling monologue, Raven revealed her story, her voice barely above a whisper, as if she feared the shadows themselves might overhear.
I was born during a lunar eclipse, just like the Shadow Child.
Her eyes distant and filled with a profound sadness.
The shadows have always called to me, whispered secrets in my ears, and shown me visions of a world consumed by darkness. I've seen the future, and it's a bleak, terrifying place.
Raven's words sent a chill down Ethan and Maya's spines, and they couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease in her presence. As she spoke, the shadows in the room seemed to grow deeper and more menacing, as if they were responding to her words.
I've witnessed the horrors that await us if the Shadow Wraiths succeed,
Raven continued, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and resolve.
Cities reduced to ruins, the skies forever darkened, and humanity enslaved by the Wraiths. The screams of the innocent haunt my dreams, and the weight of their suffering is almost too much to bear.
She paused, taking a shuddering breath before fixing Ethan and Maya with a piercing gaze.
But now, with the prophecy unfolding, I know my purpose. I must help you find and protect the Shadow Child, for they are the key to our salvation. The shadows have granted me glimpses of the child's location, but the visions are fragmented and unclear. We must hurry, for the Wraiths grow stronger with each passing moment.
As Raven finished her monologue, the room grew colder, and the shadows seemed to close in around them. Ethan and Maya knew that they had no choice but to trust in Raven's abilities and follow her lead, even as they feared what horrors they might encounter along the way. The fate of the world hung in the balance, and they were the only ones who could prevent the shadows from claiming victory. As the next eclipse approached, Ethan, Maya, Azrael and Raven ventured into the heart of the shadows, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. They discovered a hidden portal, an ancient gateway that pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly energy. As they stepped through the threshold, they found themselves in the Shadow Realm, a twisted parallel dimension filled with dark entities and nightmarish landscapes that defied the laws of nature. In the Shadow Realm, the air was thick with an oppressive darkness that seemed to seep into their very souls. The ground beneath their feet was a writhing mass of shadows, and the sky above was a swirling vortex of inky blackness. Unearthly sounds echoed in the distance, the wails and shrieks of tortured souls mingling with the sinister whispers of the shadow wraiths. As they navigated the treacherous terrain, they faced terrifying challenges that pushed them to the brink of sanity. Grotesque creatures born from the depths of nightmares stalked them at every turn, their misshapen forms and glowing red eyes filled with an insatiable hunger for flesh and fear. The group fought for their lives, their weapons and abilities put to the ultimate test as they battled against the hordes of shadow-born monstrosities. In a chilling encounter, they came face to face with a massive serpentine creature known as the Shadow Leviathan. Its scales were as black as the void, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent intelligence. As it spoke, its voice echoed through their minds, a sinister whisper that chilled them to the core.
"Foolish mortals,"
it hissed, its forked tongue darting out from between razor-sharp fangs.
"You dare to enter our realm seeking to thwart the prophecy. Your efforts are futile, for the Shadow Child will be ours and your world will be consumed by darkness."
Raven stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination.
"We will not let you claim the child,"
she declared, her voice ringing out through the shadows.
"The prophecy speaks of hope, and we will fight to protect that hope, no matter the cost."
The Shadow Leviathan let out a bone-chilling laugh, its coils tightening around the group.
"Then you will die here in the depths of the Shadow Realm, and your souls will be forever lost in the darkness."
The battle that followed was intense and grueling, with Ethan, Maya, Azrael and Raven pushing themselves to their limits to overcome the Shadow Leviathan and its minions. Azrael, the Knight Templar, stepped forward, his sword glowing with a holy light that pierced the darkness. He charged at the Shadow Leviathan, his blade clashing against the creature's scales in a shower of sparks.
In the name of the light, I banish you back to the depths of the abyss.
Azrael declared, his voice ringing out with righteous fury. The Shadow Leviathan recoiled, its eyes narrowing with hatred.
"You may wield the light, Templar, but in this realm the darkness reigns supreme."
The creature lunged at Azrael, its fangs bared in a vicious snarl. Azrael met the attack head-on, his sword a blur of motion as he parried and countered the Leviathan's strikes. The battle raged on, with Ethan, Maya and Raven joining the fray, their powers combining in a dazzling display of light and shadow. Raven's powers grew stronger in the Shadow Realm, her connection to the darkness amplified by the eclipse's energy. She became a beacon of hope in the darkness, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light as she channeled the shadows to protect her allies and strike at the Wraiths. With each blast of dark energy, the Wraiths screeched in agony, their forms dissolving into wisps of shadow. As they pressed on, the challenges only grew more daunting and the horrors more unspeakable. The Shadow Realm itself seemed to come alive, the very ground beneath their feet shifting and morphing into grotesque shapes. Whispering voices filled the air, taunting them with promises of power and temptation.
"Embrace the darkness."
The voices crooned, their words dripping with honeyed poison.
"Surrender to the shadows, and you shall know true strength." But
Ethan, Maya, Azrael and Raven remained steadfast. their resolve unshakable in the face of such temptation. They knew that they could not falter, for the fate of both worlds hung in the balance. They had to find the Shadow Child and escape the Shadow Realm before the eclipse ended, or risk being trapped in the darkness forever. As they delved deeper into the heart of the Shadow Realm, they encountered ever more twisted and malevolent entities. Shadows took on the forms of their deepest fears and darkest secrets, tormenting them with visions of failure and despair. But still, they pressed on, their determination fueled by the knowledge that they were the only hope for the innocent child caught in the midst of this ancient prophecy. Just as the eclipse reached its peak, they found the Shadow Child, a baby girl born under the shadow of the moon. The child's eyes glowed with an unearthly light, and the shadows swirled around her, responding to her every emotion. As they approached the child, a chilling laughter echoed through the chamber, sending shivers down their spines.
At last the Shadow Child is within our grasp.
A voice hissed as a figure emerged from the darkness. It was the High Wraith, the leader of the Shadow Wraiths, its form a twisted amalgamation of shadow and malice.
With her power, we shall plunge both worlds into eternal darkness.
The Shadow Wraiths descended upon them, their numbers seemingly endless. Ethan, Maya, Azrael and Raven stood their ground, determined to protect the Shadow Child at all costs. They fought with a fierce intensity, their weapons and powers clashing against the dark forces that sought to claim the child. Raven unleashed the full extent of her powers, merging with the shadows and becoming a conduit for the child's abilities. The shadows around her began to pulse with a dark energy, and her eyes blazed with an otherworldly light. She channeled the child's power, unleashing devastating blasts of shadow magic that tore through the ranks of the Shadow Wraiths. As the battle raged on, the High Wraith let out a chilling laugh.
You cannot hope to defeat us.
It taunted, its voice dripping with malevolence.
The Shadow Child belongs to us, and with her power, we shall rule over all.
But Ethan, Maya, Azrael and Raven refused to yield. They fought with a determination born of desperation, knowing that the fate of both worlds hung in the balance. The chamber shook with the force of their battle, shadows and light colliding in a dazzling display of power. In a final, desperate stand, they focused their combined strength on the High Wraith. Azrael's sword blazed with holy light, Ethan's staff crackled with arcane energy, Maya's bow sang with the power of the elements, and Raven's shadows surged with the might of the eclipse. Together they unleashed a devastating assault upon the High Wraith, their powers merging into a single unstoppable force. The High Wraith let out a final agonized scream as it was consumed by the light, its form dissolving into wisps of shadow. With its defeat, the remaining Shadow Wraiths scattered, fleeing back into the depths of the Shadow Realm. The eclipse ended, and the world returned to normal. But they knew that their fight was far from over. The Shadow Child, now safe in their care, would need to be protected and guided, for her powers held the key to the future of both worlds. As they emerged from the Shadow Realm, they knew that they had taken the first step in a long and perilous journey, one that would test their strength, their resolve, and their unity in the face of the darkness to come. Years passed, and the Shadow Child grew under the guidance of Ethan, Maya, Azrael, and Raven. They trained her to control her powers and use them for good, knowing that one day she would be the key to maintaining the balance between light and darkness. But as the child grew, so did the whispers of the shadows, tempting her with promises of power and dominion.
You are destined for greatness,
the shadows whispered. their voices like silk and venom.
Embrace your true nature, and you shall rule over all.
The Shadow Child struggled against the temptation, her young mind torn between the teachings of her guardians and the seductive pull of the darkness. Raven watched over the child, a silent guardian in the shadows. She knew all too well the allure of the darkness, having fought against it every day of her life.
The path of shadows is a lonely one.
Raven warned the child, her voice heavy with the weight of her own experiences.
It promises power, but it will consume you in the end.
As the Shadow Child grew into a young woman, her powers began to manifest in terrifying ways. The shadows around her twisted and warped, responding to her every emotion. In moments of anger or fear, the darkness would lash out, threatening to consume everything in its path. Ethan, Maya, Azrael and Raven worked tirelessly to help the young woman control her abilities, but they knew that the true test was yet to come. The prophecy spoke of a time when the Shadow Child would be forced to choose between the light and the darkness, and the fate of both worlds would hang in the balance. As the world moved forward, unaware of the battles fought in the shadows, Ethan, Maya, Azrael and Raven remained vigilant, ready to defend against any threats that might arise. They knew that the forces of darkness were always watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In the depths of the shadow realm, an ancient evil stirred, its power growing with each passing day. It whispered to the Shadow Child in her dreams, promising her the world if she would only embrace her true nature.
You are the key to my release.
The evil whispered, its voice like the rustling of dead leaves.
Free me, and together we shall plunge the world into eternal darkness.
Raven sensed the growing danger, her connection to the shadows, warning her of the impending threat. She knew that the time was coming when she would have to.
The true test of our resolve is yet to come.
Raven warned her companions, her eyes glinting with a fierce determination.
We must be ready to fight not just for the Shadow Child, but for the fate of all creation.
As the darkness gathered, Ethan, Maya, Azrael and Raven stood united. Their bond forged in the fires of battle and tempered by the weight of their shared destiny. They knew that the road ahead would be long and perilous, but they also knew that they had the strength to face whatever challenges lay before them. For they were the guardians of the light, the protectors of the innocent, and the last line of defense against the shadows that threatened to consume the world. As the ancient evil grew stronger, the moon began to change, its once gentle light now tainted by an eerie darkness. The shadows that once played across its surface now seemed to writhe and twist, as if alive with malevolent intent. The Shadow Child felt the pull of the moon's darkness, its power calling to her like a siren song. One night, as the moon hung low in the sky, the shadows around the Shadow Child began to swirl and dance, their movements becoming more frenzied with each passing moment. Raven watched in horror as the shadows coalesced into a vortex of darkness, its center a yawning abyss that threatened to swallow the Shadow Child whole.
Resist it!
Raven cried out, her voice barely audible over the howling of the shadows.
Don't let it consume you!
But the Shadow Child was transfixed, her eyes locked on the swirling depths of the vortex. She took a step forward, then another, her body moving as if pulled by an invisible force. The shadows reached out to her, their tendrils wrapping around her limbs, pulling her ever closer to the abyss. Raven lunged forward, her own shadows battling against the darkness that sought to claim the Shadow Child. But even as she fought, she could feel the ancient evil's power growing, its influence seeping into the very fabric of reality. In a final desperate act, Raven unleashed the full might of her own shadow powers, her form dissolving into a mass of living darkness. She surged forward, merging with the vortex, her essence becoming one with the shadows that threatened to consume the Shadow Child. For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath, the battle between light and darkness balanced on a razor's edge. Then, with a final wrenching effort, Raven tore the Shadow Child free from the vortex, her own shadows shielding the young woman from the worst of the darkness. As the vortex collapsed in on itself, the shadows around the Shadow Child began to calm, their movements once again becoming gentle and playful. Raven emerged from the darkness, her form solidifying as she stepped back into the world of light.
The darkness will never claim you,
Raven whispered, her voice filled with a fierce protectiveness.
not as long as I draw breath.
The Shadow Child looked up at Raven, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and gratitude. She knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges and temptations, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them as long as she had her guardians by her side. To be continued.